The rain hammered against the windows of Portland Hills Cemetery Chapel, each drop echoing the hollow ache in Blake Harrison's chest. At 32, he had built bridges and skyscrapers across the Pacific Northwest, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Watching his husband's casket disappear into the earth felt like watching his entire world collapse. Marcus Thompson had been everything Blake wasn't. Where Blake was rough-hewn and practical, Marcus was refined and visionary. The acclaimed architect had seen beauty in Portland's industrial bones, transforming abandoned warehouses into stunning lofts that dotted the Pearl District. More importantly, he had seen something worthy in Blake, a former foster kid who had clawed his way up from nothing. They had built a life together in Marcus's penthouse overlooking the Willamette River. 15 years of shared coffee on Sunday mornings, hiking the Columbia River Gorge, and quiet evenings where Marcus would sketch while Blake read construction manuals. Now the silence in that penthouse would be deafening. As the service ended and mourners began filing out, Blake remained rooted beside the grave. The rain had softened to a gentle mist, but he barely noticed. His foreman, Eddie, waited respectfully near the chapel entrance, understanding that some grief demanded solitude. That's when Blake saw him. A young man stood partially hidden behind a massive Douglas fir at the cemetery's edge. He appeared to be around 20, with dark hair plastered against his pale face by the rain. His worn denim jacket offered little protection against Portland's autumn chill, but he seemed oblivious to his discomfort. What struck Blake most was the intensity in the stranger's eyes as he stared at Marcus's grave. There was something raw and desperate in his expression, a pain that seemed to mirror Blake's own. Their eyes met briefly across the misty cemetery grounds. The young man startled, then quickly turned and walked away, disappearing down the winding path that led to Southeast Division Street. Blake felt an inexplicable pull to follow him, but Eddie's gentle touch on his shoulder brought him back to the present. The mystery of the stranger haunted Blake through the sleepless nights that followed. He found himself standing at the penthouse windows, staring out at the city lights and wondering who the young man was and why he had been at Marcus's funeral. The rational part of his mind insisted it was probably nothing, just another mourner touched by Marcus's work or reputation. But something deeper told him otherwise. Unable to shake his curiosity, Blake contacted Patricia Sullivan, the private investigator his construction company occasionally used for background checks. Within 48 hours, she had a name and an address. Tyler Thompson, 20 years old, an art student who had been living in San Francisco until recently. But it was the next piece of information that stopped Blake's heart cold. Tyler's birth certificate listed Marcus Thompson as his father. Patricia had uncovered the story through old college records and social media traces. Marcus had dated a woman named Sarah Chen during his final semester at the University of Oregon. Sarah had discovered her pregnancy after Marcus had already moved to Portland to begin his architecture career. She had made the difficult decision to raise Tyler alone, never contacting Marcus about his son. Sarah had passed away 3 months ago from cancer, leaving Tyler completely alone in the world. According to Patricia's research, he had traveled to Portland specifically to find his father, only to discover that Marcus had died just weeks before his arrival. Blake sank into Marcus's favorite chair, holding the investigator's report with trembling hands. All those years when he and Marcus had talked about having children, discussing adoption but never quite finding the right time, Marcus had already been a father. The irony was devastating. The man Blake had loved had carried this secret, this regret, without ever sharing it. But why hadn't Marcus known? As Blake processed the timeline, he realized that Marcus and Sarah's relationship had ended just before graduation. In those pre-social media days, it would have been easy to lose touch completely. Sarah had likely tried to reach Marcus through the university, but by then he had already established his life in Portland. The rain continued outside the penthouse windows as Blake grappled with this revelation. Somewhere in the city was a young man who had lost both parents within months of each other, who had come searching for connection only to find another grave. The weight of that tragedy settled over Blake like a physical presence. He thought about Marcus's sketchbooks, filled with drawings of children playing in parks, families gathered around dinner tables, scenes of domestic happiness that they had never quite achieved. Had Marcus somehow known? Had he carried this absence in his heart all these years? Blake made a decision that would change everything. He picked up his phone and called Patricia back. He needed to find Tyler Thompson, and he needed to find him soon. Some wounds were too deep to heal alone, and Blake was beginning to understand that his grief and Tyler's might be two halves of the same broken whole. The connection between strangers often begins in the most unexpected places, born from shared loss and the human need to find meaning in pain. Sometimes the family we need isn't the one we were born into, but the one that forms in the spaces left behind by love. If this story moved you, subscribe to Heart Stories for more tales of hope found in unlikely places. Pioneer Courthouse Square buzzed with its usual afternoon energy, but Blake felt disconnected from the familiar rhythm of downtown Portland. He sat at a corner table in the coffee shop overlooking the square, his hands wrapped around a cup that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He had asked Tyler to meet him here, explaining only that he had been a close friend of Marcus's and needed to speak with him. Through the rain-streaked windows, Blake watched the young man approach. Tyler moved with the cautious gait of someone who had learned not to trust easily. His vintage leather jacket was too thin for the October weather, and Blake noticed how he kept his hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched against more than just the cold. When Tyler entered the coffee shop, Blake raised his hand slightly. The young man's eyes found his immediately, and Blake was struck again by how much Tyler resembled Marcus. Not in obvious ways, but in the thoughtful tilt of his head, the way his gaze seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings before committing to movement. Tyler slid into the booth across from Blake, his movements deliberate and controlled. He ordered nothing, simply folded his hands on the scratched wooden table and waited. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Blake studied the young man's face, seeing Marcus in the sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark eyebrows drew together when he concentrated. But there was something else there too, a wariness that Marcus had never carried. This was someone who had been disappointed before. When Blake finally spoke, his voice came out rougher than intended. He told Tyler his name, explained that he had known Marcus for 15 years. Tyler's expression remained carefully neutral, giving nothing away. It wasn't until Blake mentioned that he and Marcus had been partners that something shifted in Tyler's eyes. The word partners seemed to hit Tyler like a physical blow. His carefully maintained composure cracked for just a moment, revealing confusion and something that looked like fear. Blake realized with growing certainty that Tyler had no idea his father had been gay. Blake chose his words carefully as he explained the nature of his relationship with Marcus. They had been married for 8 years, had built a life together in the penthouse that Marcus had designed. Tyler's face went through a series of emotions, processing this information about a father he had never known. The revelation seemed to unlock something in Tyler. His rigid posture softened slightly, and for the first time since sitting down, he spoke. His voice was quiet, hoarse from disuse, as he explained why he had come to Portland. His mother had died from cancer, leaving him alone with only a few photographs and stories about a father he had never met. Sarah had always spoken of Marcus with a kind of wistful respect, never with bitterness or anger. She had told Tyler that his father was a good man who simply didn't know about him, who had moved on to build something beautiful with his life. She had never mentioned that something beautiful included a husband. Blake pulled out a wooden box from his messenger bag, the same one he had found in Marcus's studio after the funeral. Tyler's eyes widened as Blake explained what it contained. Letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Tyler but never sent. Marcus had known about him, had been searching for ways to reach out for years, but had been paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Tyler's hands shook as he opened the box and unfolded the top letter. Blake watched as the young man read Marcus's words, saw the confusion and anger warring with desperate hope in his expression. The letter spoke of love and regret, of sleepless nights wondering about a son who existed somewhere beyond reach. Marcus had written about watching Tyler's high school graduation photos that Sarah's sister had posted online, about following his college acceptances and art achievements from a distance. He had carried the weight of his absence like a stone in his chest. wanting to reach out but terrified of disrupting the life Tyler had built with his mother. The coffee shop continued its afternoon bustle around them, but their corner booth felt isolated from the world. Tyler read portions of several letters, his composure gradually crumbling. Blake could see the young man struggling with the revelation that his father had known about him, had cared about him, but had chosen silence over the risk of rejection. When Tyler finally looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. He asked why Blake was sharing this with him, what he wanted in return. The question hung between them, loaded with the suspicion of someone who had learned that kindness usually came with conditions. Blake had anticipated this moment, but he still struggled to find the right words. He explained that Marcus's death had left a hole in his world that felt impossible to fill. But finding out about Tyler had given him something unexpected, a piece of Marcus that was still alive, still breathing, still full of unrealized potential. Tyler's response was swift and sharp. He pushed the wooden box across the table, stood up with jerky, angry movements. He didn't want Blake's pity or his guilt-driven charity. He had managed fine without a father for 20 years and certainly didn't need a substitute now. Before Blake could respond, Tyler was gone, disappearing into the crowded square like he had never been there at all. Blake sat alone with the rejected letters, feeling the weight of another failure settling over him like Portland's familiar rain. The path to healing rarely runs straight, especially when it involves two people carrying different pieces of the same broken story. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let someone walk away from the connection they desperately need, but are too afraid to accept. Blake found Tyler 3 days later sitting on a bench beside the Willamette River, sketching the steel bridge with quick, confident strokes. The young man's cheap hotel was only 6 blocks away, but Blake had been driving past this spot twice a day, somehow knowing that Tyler would eventually gravitate toward the water. Portland's riverfront had always been Marcus's favorite place to think. He used to say that the city's bridges were like architectural prayers, each one reaching across the divide with its own unique faith. Now Blake understood why Tyler might be drawn here too. There was something about moving water that made difficult conversations feel possible. Tyler didn't look up when Blake approached, but his pencil paused mid-stroke. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant hum of traffic and the gentle lap of water against the embankment. Blake respected the quiet, understanding that Tyler was deciding whether to run again or stay. When Tyler finally spoke, his voice carried less anger than it had at the coffee shop. He asked if Blake had come to try again with the letters. Blake shook his head, settling onto the bench with careful distance between them. Instead, he had come with an invitation. He wanted to show Tyler the life Marcus had built, the spaces where he had lived and worked and dreamed. Tyler's initial response was skeptical. He had no interest in touring his dead father's accomplishments like some kind of morbid museum exhibit. But something in Blake's tone suggested this wasn't about Marcus's professional legacy. This was about understanding the man behind the architecture, the person who had written those agonizing letters. Blake's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, one of Marcus's early renovation projects. As the elevator climbed, Blake explained how Marcus had transformed the industrial space into something warm and livable. The building had been scheduled for demolition when Marcus bought it, seeing potential where others saw only decay. The elevator opened directly into the living space, and Tyler's breath caught audibly. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city and river, but it was Marcus's presence that filled the room. His architectural drawings covered one entire wall, sketches and blueprints that showed the evolution of Portland's skyline over the past decade. Tyler moved through the space like he was walking through a dream. Every surface told a story about Marcus's life and interests. Books on sustainable design sat next to volumes of poetry. A collection of vintage cameras occupied a shelf beside architectural awards. The kitchen showed signs of someone who had loved to cook, with well-used copper pots in a spice rack that spoke of adventurous tastes. But it was Marcus's studio that truly revealed the man behind the professional reputation. The converted second bedroom overflowed with creative energy. Half-finished sketches covered the drafting table, ideas for projects that would never be built. The walls displayed Marcus's personal artwork, paintings and drawings that captured Portland's moods and seasons with intimate detail. Tyler stopped before a series of canvases that showed the city from unusual angles. Marcus had painted Portland from rooftops and bridges, from hidden alleyways and secret gardens. These weren't the tourist postcard views, but the artist's perspective, finding beauty in overlooked corners and forgotten spaces. Blake watched Tyler examine each piece, seeing the young man's professional appreciation for his father's technique. Tyler was an art student himself, Blake remembered, and he could see the critical evaluation happening behind Tyler's careful expressions. These weren't just sentimental keepsakes, but genuine artistic achievements. The most revealing discovery came when Tyler opened a flat file drawer beside the drafting table. Inside were dozens of sketches and studies, but not architectural ones. These were portraits, figure studies, moments of observed humanity that Marcus had captured in quiet moments. Blake had never seen most of them before. Among the portraits was one that made Tyler freeze completely. A charcoal drawing of a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, holding a baby with serious dark eyes. The technique was masterful, but it was the emotional weight of the piece that took Blake's breath away. Marcus had drawn this from a photograph, but he had infused it with longing and love and profound regret. Tyler's hands trembled as he lifted the drawing. Blake could see the recognition in his face, the understanding that Marcus had carried this image with him for 20 years. This wasn't just a sketch, but a shrine, a way of keeping his unknown son close, even when distance and fear kept them apart. Blake explained how he had found the drawing among Marcus's things after the funeral, along with boxes of newspaper clippings about Tyler's academic achievements and art show reviews. Marcus had followed his son's life from afar, collecting proof of Tyler's existence like sacred relics. The weight of this revelation settled over Tyler visibly. He had grown up believing his father was simply absent, had built his identity around that absence. Learning that Marcus had been watching, caring, hoping from a distance, changed everything about his own story. Blake offered Tyler the guest room, not as charity, but as connection. The penthouse felt too large and too quiet for one person, and Tyler needed time to process what he had learned about his father. More than that, Blake was beginning to understand that Tyler's presence brought Marcus back to life in ways that solitude never could. Tyler's acceptance was hesitant but genuine. He would stay for a few days, maybe a week, just long enough to sort through his feelings and decide what came next. Neither of them realized that this temporary arrangement would become the foundation for something much more permanent and precious. Understanding often begins with seeing the world through someone else's eyes. Recognizing that the stories we tell ourselves about abandonment and love might be incomplete. Sometimes the greatest tragedy isn't being forgotten, but being remembered with such intensity that fear becomes stronger than hope. Living together required negotiations that neither Blake nor Tyler had anticipated. The penthouse that had once felt too large for Blake now seemed to shrink around their careful politeness. They moved around each other like dancers learning an unfamiliar choreography, each hyper-aware of taking up too much space in the other's grief. Tyler had claimed the guest room, but his real sanctuary became Marcus's studio. Blake would find him there in the mornings, surrounded by sketchbooks and architectural plans, trying to decode his father through creative debris. Tyler approached Marcus's work with the analytical eye of a fellow artist, studying brushstrokes and design philosophy like archaeological evidence. The first real breakthrough came during Portland's October heatwave, when the penthouse's industrial windows turned the space into a greenhouse. Blake was struggling with the ancient air conditioning system when Tyler appeared with a toolbox, explaining that his mother had taught him basic mechanical skills. Working side by side to fix the unit, they discovered they shared Marcus's stubborn refusal to call professionals for problems they could solve themselves. Tyler's revelation about his sexuality came naturally during one of their evening conversations on the balcony. Blake had been sharing stories about Marcus's early activism in Portland's LGBTQ community when Tyler mentioned his own struggles with coming out to his mother. Sarah had been supportive but worried, understanding that her son would face challenges she couldn't fully comprehend. Blake recognized the familiar weight in Tyler's voice, the burden of carrying an identity that sometimes felt like a secret even when it wasn't hidden. He shared his own coming-out story, the years of foster homes where being different meant being vulnerable, the relief of finding Marcus in a community that celebrated rather than merely tolerated authenticity. Their conversations revealed the parallel tracks their lives had followed. Both had learned early that family wasn't guaranteed, that love required courage and persistence. Tyler's relationship with his mother had been close but shadowed by his father's absence, while Blake's connection with Marcus had been profound but marked by their inability to create the family they had both secretly wanted. The first major conflict arose when Marcus's sister arrived from Seattle with legal papers. Margaret Thompson had always disapproved of her brother's lifestyle, and Marcus's death had awakened her sense of family entitlement. She wanted to contest the will, arguing that Blake had no right to inherit property that should stay within the Thompson bloodline. Tyler's presence complicated her legal strategy but also strengthened it. As Marcus's biological son, Tyler had a legitimate claim to his father's estate. Margaret arrived at the penthouse with her lawyer and a custody evaluation expert, prepared to argue that Tyler belonged with his biological family rather than with his father's grieving partner. Blake watched Tyler navigate this impossible situation with surprising maturity. The young man listened to Margaret's arguments about family responsibility and genetic connection, but his responses revealed a sophisticated understanding of what family actually meant. Tyler had grown up knowing that love was a choice rather than an obligation. That commitment mattered more than chromosomes. The legal battle forced Tyler to articulate what he wanted from his relationship with Blake. Standing in the penthouse living room while lawyers took notes, Tyler established 3 non-negotiable boundaries. Blake was not his father and shouldn't try to replace Marcus. Their relationship required complete honesty about Marcus's past and their own intentions, and Tyler needed the freedom to leave if their arrangement stopped working for either of them. Blake accepted these conditions without hesitation, understanding that Tyler's terms protected them both from the dangerous territory of replacement and substitution. They weren't trying to recreate Marcus's lost family, but to build something entirely new from their shared connection to him. Margaret's legal challenge ultimately failed, but not before forcing Blake and Tyler to defend their unconventional bond to skeptical authorities. The process revealed how much their relationship had evolved beyond grief and obligation into genuine affection and mutual support. Tyler's decision to enroll at Portland State University's architecture program surprised everyone, including himself. He had always planned to continue his art studies in San Francisco, but something about Marcus's unfinished projects called to him. He wanted to understand the technical side of his father's creativity, to learn the language of blueprints and building codes. Blake offered to help with tuition, but Tyler insisted on contributing through part-time work with Blake's construction company. Their professional collaboration added another dimension to their relationship, with Tyler bringing fresh aesthetic perspective to Blake's practical projects while learning the physical reality of construction work. The rhythm of their shared life settled into something comfortable but never presumptuous. They cooked together on weekends, with Blake teaching Tyler the hearty meals Marcus had loved, while Tyler introduced Blake to the Vietnamese dishes his mother had perfected. They attended gallery openings and construction site inspections, building a social circle that included both Marcus's old friends and Tyler's new classmates. Winter brought the first anniversary of Marcus's death, and with it a reckoning that neither had fully prepared for. Blake had expected the date to be difficult, but Tyler's presence transformed the experience from solitary mourning into shared remembrance. They spent the day completing one of Marcus's unfinished sketches together, Tyler adding the artistic details while Blake contributed the architectural accuracy. By spring, when their temporary arrangement had become permanent in all but name, Tyler had found his place in Portland's creative community, while Blake had rediscovered purpose in nurturing someone else's dreams. Neither spoke directly about their long-term intentions, but their actions suggested a commitment that transcended their original grief-born connection. The strongest families are often those that choose each other deliberately, built not on accidents of birth, but on conscious decisions to stay connected through difficulty and growth. Sometimes healing requires not just processing loss, but discovering what new forms of love become possible in its aftermath. The second autumn brought unexpected challenges that tested the foundation Blake and Tyler had built together. A developer approached them with an offer to buy the entire warehouse building, planning to demolish it for a luxury hotel complex. The gentrification pressure that had been transforming Portland for years had finally reached their doorstep. Blake's initial instinct was to refuse immediately, but Tyler surprised him by wanting to consider the offer seriously. The young man had been researching Portland's housing crisis for a university project and understood how their decision might impact the broader community. The building housed 8 other units, including several artists and longtime residents who couldn't afford market-rate alternatives elsewhere. Their disagreement revealed deeper tensions about belonging and responsibility. Blake saw the penthouse as his last tangible connection to Marcus, while Tyler viewed it as a privilege that came with obligations to their neighbors and community. The conversation forced them to examine what they owed each other versus what they owed the city that had shaped Marcus's career and values. Tyler's struggles with anxiety medication added another layer of complexity to their relationship. The death of his mother had triggered panic attacks that he had managed to hide until the anniversary of her passing. Blake discovered Tyler's condition accidentally, finding him in the bathroom at 3 in the morning, hands shaking as he tried to open a prescription bottle. The revelation brought back painful memories of Blake's own foster care experience, watching other kids medicate trauma with whatever they could find. But Tyler's situation was different, requiring professional support rather than simply tough love. Blake helped Tyler find a therapist who specialized in grief counseling for young adults, learning to navigate the balance between support and independence. Marcus's incomplete projects became a source of both connection and tension. Tyler had discovered plans for an affordable housing complex that Marcus had been developing before his death, a project that could address some of the displacement pressure their neighborhood was facing. But bringing Marcus's vision to life would require significant financial investment and professional collaboration that Blake wasn't sure he was ready to undertake. The decision to move forward with Marcus's affordable housing project transformed their relationship from personal to professional partnership. Blake brought his construction expertise while Tyler contributed architectural vision and community connections. Working together on something larger than their individual grief gave their bond new purpose and direction. Tyler's relationship with a fellow architecture student named Jamie complicated the household dynamic in unexpected ways. Blake found himself in the awkward position of being supportive roommate rather than parental figure. Watching Tyler navigate young love with the intensity that comes from having experienced significant loss. The presence of another young person in their space forced Blake to examine his own assumptions about family structure and emotional boundaries. The legal completion of Tyler's name change to Tyler Thompson Harrison marked a turning point in their relationship. The hyphenated name acknowledged both his biological connection to Marcus and his chosen family bond with Blake, creating a new identity that honored past and present simultaneously. The ceremony was small, held in the courthouse where Blake and Marcus had been married, with many of the same witnesses celebrating this different but equally meaningful family formation. Portland State University's offer for Tyler to present his thesis project at a national architecture conference represented the culmination of his academic growth and creative development. His proposal for mixed-use affordable housing drew directly from Marcus's unfinished work, while incorporating contemporary sustainability practices and community input. Blake watched from the audience as Tyler presented ideas that would have made Marcus incredibly proud. The conference presentation led to internship offers from several prestigious firms, including positions in New York and Los Angeles that could launch Tyler's career at the highest levels. The opportunities forced both men to confront what their relationship would look like if geographic distance entered the equation. Their conversations about Tyler's future revealed how much their bond had evolved beyond convenience or substitution into genuine family commitment. Tyler's decision to stay in Portland and launch a nonprofit architecture collaborative surprised everyone who had assumed he would chase traditional professional success. His choice to build on Marcus's legacy while creating his own path demonstrated the mature integration of inherited wisdom and personal vision that defines successful adulthood. The third anniversary of Marcus's death brought them to Portland Hills Cemetery, not as strangers united by grief, but as family members honoring shared history. They brought flowers that Tyler had grown in the rooftop garden he had created above the penthouse, continuing Marcus's love of bringing natural beauty into urban spaces. Standing beside Marcus's grave, Tyler spoke aloud to his father for the first time since discovering his letters. He told Marcus about Blake's patient guidance, about finding his place in Portland's creative community, about learning that family could be built through choice and commitment rather than just biology. Blake listened without interrupting, understanding that this conversation belonged to Tyler and Marcus alone. Their walk back through the cemetery revealed how completely their relationship had transformed from its desperate beginnings. They moved through the world now as people who belonged to each other by deliberate choice, who had created something strong enough to weather loss and change and the ordinary difficulties of building a life together. The nonprofit architecture firm they established in Marcus's name became a model for how creative professionals could address community needs while honoring personal legacy. Tyler's leadership of the organization fulfilled Marcus's vision while reflecting his son's own values and priorities, creating continuity without mere imitation. Blake's role evolved from grieving widower to proud family member, watching Tyler grow into someone who carried Marcus's best qualities while developing his own distinct voice and vision. Their relationship proved that family bonds forged in crisis could mature into something as strong and lasting as any traditional connection. When Tyler brought Jamie home for Thanksgiving dinner in their 4th year together, Blake understood that their family would continue expanding in ways that honored Marcus's memory while embracing new possibilities. The table conversation included stories about Marcus that kept his presence alive while making room for new relationships and future dreams. How do we honor the people we've lost while still allowing ourselves to grow beyond their absence? The strongest tribute to those who shaped us might be our willingness to love again, differently but no less deeply. Subscribe to Heart Stories for more tales of families formed by choice, courage, and the belief that connection can emerge from even the deepest loss.